I just came from a mango festival, from judging a mango festival, so I'm going to start with, appropriately, a mango poem. This is from my first full-length book called Free Season. And I guess you guys, everybody who has a mango tree here probably knows it's a terrible mango season.
Yeah.
So we really didn't have many first mangoes, but this is called First Mango of the Season. The first mango of the season is in miniature, precise down to its blush, but smaller than a peach, skin and flesh hinged to a pit the heft of an almond, and like furniture crafted for a dollhouse, it is on scale with a blue jay who flies with it clamped in his beak to the ficus hedge, where he lets loose the fruit to peruse it with an eye as practiced as a chef's. Propped just so on the twisted crop of bush that serves as counter for the mise en place, the jay sharpens his beak on the bark to his left, while the mango waits like a grape for the crush, the chief of tense change from is to was. And I am not at all upset about not having 500 mangoes to pick up every day, but next year you guys are all welcome to come. Lenny, you are going to be the recipient of tons of mangoes, so, you know.
Hopefully I'll remember to take them home.
Yeah, we'll remind you, don't worry about it. You know. This is a beautiful library. I've never been here before, but thank you so much for having me. I'm going to read a couple of poems from American Sentencing, hopefully poems you haven't heard before. I'm trying to vary it up a little. American Sentencing is a book about invisible illnesses, all kinds of invisible illnesses, mental as well as physical. So I'm going to start with one that I read before. It's called The Invention of Amniocentesis. They like to practice that on my mother when she was pregnant with me. They invented amniocentesis, but they hadn't invented the ultrasound yet. So they used to just guess where the baby was and then poke you. Fine. Mother, in your womb, I am an experiment. You pass on not immunity, but its silvery underside. Give permission for the needle, like an arrow, to birth holes in this temporary home. Sip the fluid like a taster of fine wines without the benefit of a visible image. No bigger than a black widow spider, the doctors must guess where I am and agree there is nothing to be done. I am poison to both of us. Unsafe harbor, you insist on mooring me to your designated slip, tossed by rash after rash of storms. I will remove myself early. Still ill, of course you will not care for me right away. Of all the eggs you might have nourished, I am the one who breaks you. Self-diagnosis. Tropical depression. I am a fractured horizon, unmet by either deep ocean or honest sky. My hemmed-in thoughts melt, frown, marred by rise, set, nova, repeat. What mullet could leap consistently through such endless pointillism and still know where to land? What manatee could find space to surface? What dolphin air to breathe? I swim with hands ready to meet door jamb, feet to bedpost. Tentacled, toxic to all but their host. Bruises blossom like sea anemone. Sheets of silk or water draw me between. There is little point to knowing up or down. On days like this, it's sideways that I drown. That was actually a poem about vertigo, which is a really fun thing to experience. This is a cento, which is made up of found lines, and there are a whole bunch of different poets that I took lines from, which I acknowledge in the book. This is called ICU Pro Cento. Even now, when skin is not alone, it remembers being alone, the dignity of being alive for a short time in a very different way, the sickly thing asserting its will only now at the end, loitering in the morning chill, faking a French accent, the echo calling a fossil back to name. My horse, my hound, what will I do when you are fallen? Chances are the answer is missing too. The windows close. The wind through my heart blows all my candles out. I do not write of riches. I have none. I am not lonely for the palpable world. Wouldn't it be wrong not to mention joy? This is a poem that I wrote in Sweden. I used to travel right more frequently than I do now, but it's actually about making glass. Glass is a really interesting substance to attempt to make if you've never made it, because it's extremely heavy when you transform it into its liquid form, which I didn't realize until I tried to do it, and I almost dropped it on my foot. So I advise you, if you're going to do that, be strong. Labor. In the womb of the furnace, the glass can only imagine itself. Sibling between sand and lava, it is a nova on the end of my pole that I must power like a spit so that it doesn't fall slow motion in a luminescent globule on my foot, or worse, the floor. Dip into tint and spin, wash in water and spin, return to flames and spin as cramps sweat under my skin and I unlock the damper of my diaphragm, loosen and harden in turn to breathe, breathe, breathe this body into being. And the thing about glass is that you can't stop spinning it or it will harden or do something terrible. I really wasn't very good at that. I'm going to read one more poem from this book. This is called What My Autopsy Will Reveal. The glass houses of organs were bottles with ships atilt inside. Stones made fences where not even dust should have been raised. Hits were recorded, not recovered from. Meals became anthropologic. Wisdom was lost long before memory was impacted like molders. A tree damaged more than 50% in a storm. This body, split along the sap lines, should have long ago been removed, stump dug up, trunk ground down, its remains spread over the mango roots to fertilize the living fruit, the one task it could embrace without failure. And now I'm going to go to something more cheerful, like the end of the world. Yeah, this is it was a fun year. I had these two books come out in the same year, and when I started reading them together, I realized that neither one were really very cheerful. So, The Treasures that Prevail is about Miami drowning, and it was a fun book to write, actually, because I got to imagine what it would be like living in my house, which has lots of mango trees, and kind of privately trying to build a stilt house in the backyard without anybody knowing it. And that's the loose narrative that runs through it, that two women decide not to leave when the drowning begins, and to keep their family and raise them, and what becomes basically like Stiltsville, and stay there. So they sort of ride out the wave. This one is called Private Message from an Ex-Hunter. Alligator, I have celebrated your birthplace, but not mourned at your bony graveyard. I have scorned and burned the unobtainable terrain, flushed out those who have remained hidden with false calls, duck, quail, pheasant, grouse. This is where I've leveled threats and bulleted demands, my dear, for your rack and meat. You, boar, have met my hands, atrophied. I don't miss you. I miss the hope of you. This is a poem about building that stilt house, building the future. We told the city it was a garden shed, stocked up on can openers and machetes, steel siding with a guarantee to last the lifespan of a marmoset. We told the city it was a tiki hut, learned how to harvest bamboo and cut rattan, plate the finest tassa jute, and also eat it in soup. We told the city it was a treehouse, sunk pillars next to each mango in its patient position left over from the plantation days, trunks set into formation like clarinets in a marching band. We said we would evacuate along the prescribed path without our pets, but with our children and important papers, enough belongings for a day or two in the school gym. We never told the city Keelong, Pangbook, Palfito, heliotrope, stilt house. Not because the city told us they didn't have permits for the end of dry-footed days, but because when it came time to hoist it like a flag and follow suit, we had already found our hot, briny resolve while the city was still looking for a problem. This is in the house now, for use in forecasting. When the Paracree tide comes in, it sucks at the house like a child on a mango pit cut too generously into the cheek, slurping at the pilings, and the dachshund runs from side to side, barking and snarling at the swirl of waves with their heads cut of frost, infinite elderly ladies. She has never minded not being walked, reminded us long before the drowning how not everything is waterproof, how easy it is for spines to be snapped like wood or tile, even the teak and cedar, even the artisanal Tuscan Cato that is no match for the velocity of rejection, assurances of short, falsified sight. And I'm going to read 2 more from this book and then just a couple of new poems. This one is a really strange one, but a couple of years ago there was an article in the newspaper about this ship that had been sailing across the ocean all on its own without any people on it and no captain and no crew, and it finally landed and they found that it had been infested with rats who were actually surviving by eating each other. And then of course breeding, because they need more rats. So there was actually this, they called it a ghost ship, and it was filled with cannibal rats. So that's the name of the poem, On a Ghost Ship Filled with Cannibal Rats. Rival tribesmen, rodent donners, they eat each other like gators or guppies, not just the young or weak or the enemy, adrift but still adroit on an ocean as vast as a pupil, taking turns at tiller and tow line, salvage with a bite, and breed Yersinia pestis, bubonic, septicemic, pneumonic. Here we circle the kayaks into a ring of rays, a hollow sun, piebald our clothing in the bleach of doorstop sea, raise the spirits of felines, blind our children for their own good, and listen to the wind skimming the surfaces of reeds, playing the hunger song of the hunter we claim to have forgotten, but recall, despite ourselves, all too well. I see this is a Diet Pepsi place. Diet Coke is where it's at. Yeah. This is the last poem in the book. This is actually the poem that I started with, and it's called Speed Barefoot Over the Wrecks. It has a line from Adrienne Rich, and this is also where the title of the book came from. I came to see the damage that was done and the treasures that prevail. The trick is to ease the hold on the handle. Don't allow knuckles to knot like curtains over a rod braced between the shoulders of a double-hung window. I lie back in the water to start, feet meeting hands, reading rope at mid-thigh, ears immersed in the amniotic bouillon, listening only to the heartbeat of the ocean, as if there is no other world, was never another world below me. I give a thumbs up to the driver of the boat who will ease me, feeding me out from the other end of the cord before pulling taut, and I resist the drag. This is not labor. The spray claps my face like applause, each drop one of approval, and while the wind in my hair is generated, the source of its power is not man-drilled, not a god, but the childish, oblivious sun, who cares nothing about what goes on underneath it, about what it can or cannot dry up. And I am up, riding the weedy surface on the flats of my feet, over flooded, flattened houses, whose ghosts billow under my soles, blowing up into a white-tipped wake that my heels zip through, sun-bruised, mango-cured, tough as sharks. Still, they are spiny sea urchins, these spirits of screened-in Florida rooms where pianos used to wait for hands reluctant as fire in wet sawgrass, underutilized kitchens owned by diners who preferred restaurants, bedrooms that saw nothing more than too little sleep, achieved with the open mouth of the dead and the disrespectful. Now the Dade County pine floors, once so prized and polished, were scarred by termites, and the careening claws of dogs have rotted, either way, into driftwood. Coral has gone back to coral. The dogs who have been left to us wear life jackets, and the dead live again, reefs for grouper and parrotfish. If I look down into the foundations of heartbreak and recovery, epiphanies and realizations, culminations and failures, I too will fall, forgetting all fundamentals, unable to tuck and roll, my external walls shooting nails in every direction to wash up later on the beaches like teeth, each room of my body cartwheeling into disrepair. So I keep my eyes forward toward what would be the ponytails of palms and the canopies of mangoes, if those trees still rooted here, and my grip casual, thumbs lined up next to index fingers as if on a golf club, holding on to nothing too dear, too dearly. And I'm just going to read a couple of poems from my manuscript that I just completed, which is about another really cheerful subject, the migrants in the Mediterranean. I can't help it, I'm sorry. You know, there's a big conversation going on in poetry about whose story you're allowed to write and whether you're allowed to take on anybody else's story. So when I was thinking about writing about this particular subject, I had to decide how to do it. So I decided to do it from the point of view of the boat. I wrote 30 poems to begin this book from the point of view of a migrant boat taking the migrants back and forth. This first poem is called Akika, the Boat Speaks. I was born barely competent from the ribs of men, not in the way you've heard before, the first human sparing one from his left side to form a body so dissimilar he had to rename it, prefixed into Christian myth, woman. I admit there are some coincidences. By my own count, on the 6th day, I was sanded for the use of money men, then painted for movement in the belly of the night in the way that is the preference of so many men who pretend disapproval but disguise desire with prayer. Outwardly, I was Eliza, hardly a lady for a gentleman. So perhaps it is more accurate to say that I was hacked from the trees of Tunis into succulent ribs, the hands of men bonding me into a corset, fitting me to a country where no one makes decisions, not even men, to be stuffed like a gutted pepper with a never-ending mix of brightly spiced football jerseys flavored with the scent of men, then set to roast again on a convective sea where a cortege of waves carried me not to an end destined by gods or men, but to a middle where borders are invisible symptoms and the disease is sacrifice, mandated for all obedient women. And I will close with this really happy one called Anatomy of a Shipwreck in the Mediterranean. Here lie the femurs, drowned swimmers' bones raised with cranes to analyze back on land, under lights more clinical than this one, bleaching wood day after day with loggerhead patterns. Here lies the spine, unacknowledged guide of the body, broken with the wind of work. Here lie the clavicles, the scapula, pinned down by too much weight, and no forward motion of the heart to the mat of the sea. Here lies the skull, empty of a captain to be its compass, only sockets for senses. Here lies the rib cage, almost intact, that cultivated such valuable grain for the insatiable combine of waves. When compressed air replaces the water and it buoys to the surface, why can't the men tally more than a harvest of decomposition? Thank you very much.